position units we're most sure about. And that's why I was leading into Nico, now that I think about it. I have a lot of confidence in Nico based off what I've been told, both on and off the record. John, as far as one unit that I believe will be, again, barring injury and all these, that will elevate their play from last year, I think it's quarterback. And I think I can make a strong argument that if it's just based off elevate play from last year, that has a ripple effect and affects more than any other position group on this team.
Yeah, you can make that point. When I think of that as like position group, because yes, with Nico, but what concerns me about Tennessee at quarterback is the drop off from Nico to the next guy is stupendous. You go from the $8 million man, give or take a few million, to a two-time walk-on in Gaston Moore. Tennessee has no real proven depth at that position. So if you lose Nico for a game or so, you could be in big trouble depending on the game. But yeah, from a standpoint of a player and improvement, I kind of agree with you. I hadn't thought about it from that angle. But yeah, because we saw it in the bowl game, and I know the numbers weren't much. I mean, I think Nico passed for 157 yards. It wasn't the numbers. It was just watching the guy play and watching him at the goal line when he's trying to get in the end zone. He scored 3 touchdowns. He just knew when to cut, where to cut, and it was almost like he just kind of eased into the end zone. The way he saw the field and everything. Maybe I'm making too much of that, but I just guys like that can do what he did in that bowl game. To me, he didn't run 80 yards for a touchdown, but he made plays that you think, wow, what a move that was. Look how he saw the field there. And so, yeah, the difference in going from Milton to Nico in this offense, there's a huge difference. So you make a really good point with that.
Which position group can be elite, take the biggest jump? The show represented by Banks and Jones. Don't forget Banks and Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney. Play to win. They go to trial when other attorneys won't.
19 years.
And that's not Banks and Jones. Let's get to T. Scott Jones. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? Banks and Jones, T. Scott Jones, banksandjones.com. Okay, so mine, it's quarterback, but what position group do you have the most trust in to take another step in preseason camp and be elite, John Adams?
Well, that's the defensive line. I've been covering Tennessee a long time, and you remember with some of the best teams, you go back into the 90s, late 90s, really, the depth in the defensive line was really impressive. I mean, they had backups that ended up playing in the NFL. And I look at this defensive front. I don't think it's at that level, but I think it's the best Tennessee's had in a long time. When you've got a guy like in the middle of the defense, Norman-Lott playing as a back, he's listed as number 2 on your depth chart, and you've got a Joshua Joseph as a backup pass rusher. That tells me something about the strength. I think Tennessee can go 9 or 10 deep on the defensive front. That's based on a 4-man front and not having a drop off. And to me, where that pays off so much is late in the game, especially if you've got a lead and the other team is forced to throw the ball and you're a little worried about your secondary, but you can still maintain the same level of pass rush as you did in the first quarter. That to me is really significant. I know those big guys get tired, but I think Tennessee will be able to keep them fresh. I think this is one of the best defensive line groups in the country.
Pretty strong.
Yep, I fully agree with John. And I'm to the point though, like I'm specific on edge rusher. I this is a generational thing. I get it. You know, when y'all covered defensive line was all one unit. I think of the pass rushers as a totally different position group almost in the interior defensive lineman at this point because they can play off the line of scrimmage. But I'm going to stick with edge rushers because of the most obvious one is James Pierce. And you brought up John and Joshua Joseph's on the other side. But then there are just guys like Jordan Ross is coming in who was a 5-star. David Hobbs is supposed to be elite. I mean, they're just loaded with depth to the point where I don't think they're going to take much of a jump. I think they were amazing last year. I think they're just going to look better this year because of the jump that quarterback is going to make, which is quarterback's going to give a big enough lead where Tennessee is going to be able to just unleash those edge rushers. John, with Dave, the comparison I've used is how the Colts were constructed with Peyton Manning back in the day. They said, let's just get Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis and unleash them because we know Peyton will get us a lead and it'll be obvious passing downs. And I think Tennessee's constructed in a similar way. And yeah, I think they're going to be amazing, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good analogy comparing to the Colts. I remember, I guess Dwight Freeney was probably he had as quick a step off the line as I've ever seen in college. It was just amazing how quick he got off the line. I remember watching him at Syracuse. I saw him in several games, and he could certainly impact a game. And James Pierce, he's so good. I didn't even mention him when I was talking about the depth. It's almost as though I think Tennessee has two players that you really don't need to talk about much. And you go with Nico. I don't care that he hasn't been a full-time starter. I just know the talent that's there, and everything I've heard from people who've observed him day to day and in practice, and then go to Pierce. I mean, in a way, the Citrus Bowl was like a highlight video for both those guys. It was like you watched that game and you said, okay, I don't need to look at those guys anymore. I know what they can do. Forget them. They're over here. They're elite. And so now let's see what the rest of the lineup can do.
I think there's another factor in Pierce that I haven't brought out, but I want to do that right now. Portions of the program brought to you by Medicare Misty. We know how difficult Medicare is. To sign up for Medicare Misty takes care of you. No charge to you, Medicare Misty. I'm going to tell you why James Pierce can be way better this year than he was last year.
19 years this year. I've been in the community since 1993. You're getting a lot of information. Unlike when you were working, they made the choice for you. Now you have to make the choice. Come to us and let us help you make it easy. Call Medicare Misty, MedicareMisty.com or 423-777-5577. Let us help them sleep at night.
And we call her Medicare Misty.
You can go ahead and click on that QR code right there for Medicare Misty. Again, no charge to you. Guys, I think part of the reason that James Pierce is going to be more impactful, more statistically relevant, and have a lot more fun is because this offense is going to pull away from more teams if it's running more efficiently. And that's what he wants to do. James Pierce can say, I take a lot of pride in playing the run, but nobody with that sort of pass rushing ability has ever said, I want to play the run. Nobody.
Well, yeah, that's valid. When you think about it, if you force teams to pass, I mean, ideally, I think when you're playing Tennessee, you want to be able to run the ball. So all of this kind of comes together, enhances other aspects. When you think about it, teams would like to come in and run the ball against Tennessee, keep a big play offense off the field. But this defensive front is going to be very difficult to run against. We talk about depth in the pass rush. I think depth in the interior of the line, and maybe with Keenan Peely, the BYU transfer, coming on strong against the run, this team could be very good against the run. So if you get behind and you got to pass more than you want to, as you say, that just gives then you turn James Pierce loose, and he can have some really big games that way.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's and that's what we saw, by the way, in 2022 and actually 2021. If you guys remember, Byron Young became a star out of nowhere for Tennessee because they were so good in the first quarter in 2021 at getting a lead that out of the blue, Byron Young became an elite pass rusher, and he's now in the NFL and has NFL money. And I think he was considered one of the best defensive rookies in the NFL last year. I think you could see that with James Pierce. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, I mean, the last transcendent defensive lineman I watched for Tennessee, and people are going to say Derek Barnett, but I'm going to say it was the 2000 John Henderson season. And I'm like, could James Pierce be that on the edge for Tennessee this year, what Henderson was in the middle in 2000?
Well, I mean, I would settle for Derek Barnett and Henderson. Yeah, he might have been better and had more of an impact. He was a great player. I really enjoyed watching him play because as a defensive lineman, he was one of those guys that never let up. He would chase plays down in the deep into a secondary. So yeah, that's a great comparison. I don't know if he can have as one player as an edge rusher, if he can have that kind of effect. You certainly are going to have to scheme for him. He's one of those guys that can create opportunities for other players.